This is Dateline News and Conversation. We're live. My guest tonight has become a really good friend. She's been on the show before. She is a retired CIA analyst. She was stationed in Jordan for a couple of years. She knows the Middle East. Tonight, we're going to talk about Donald Trump. What advice would you give to Donald Trump? And we're going to talk about, I really can't get over this now. I'm trying to understand, but why would President Putin agree for a trilateral meeting in Abu Dhabi between Russian representatives from Ukraine? I'm not sure who's attending, but it happened today. And this United States delegation of real estate gangsters. They're not diplomats. Witkoff, Kushner, and some other guy. So we're going to talk about this tonight. My guest is Elizabeth Murray. Elizabeth, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Regis. Good to be back with you.
Oh, Elizabeth, I've been wanting to have you on here for the last 2 or 3 weeks, but between you having a cold and other things going on, couldn't do it. So I'm so happy to have you tonight. Now, as I said in the introduction, you are a retired former CIA analyst. You spent your entire career in the CIA as an analyst, not as an operative. If you could get Trump's ear today, starting 1 year ago, when he took office, what would you be telling Donald Trump?
That's a tall order because I don't know if he would listen to what I had to say, but if I had his ear, I would definitely advise him to transform his board of peace into an actual board of peace. I mean, if he really wanted to do the right thing in the Middle East, he has an opportunity. Right now, the board of peace doesn't include any Palestinians that are representatives of the people of Gaza, which is what the board of peace is supposed to administer. He could staff it with, he could release Marwan Barghouti from prison, he's one of the best, most credible and respected Palestinians who's been imprisoned by Israel for a long time. He could make sure that Israel releases Barghouti and put him at the head of the board of peace. He could actually help bring about a positive transformation. But unfortunately, the people that he's staffed it with, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his right-hand man, Steve Witkoff, they are people who are interested in, making a real estate bonanza out of Gaza and basically building on the bones of and continuing the genocide and finishing off the ethnic cleansing project. I mean, you have people such as Benjamin Netanyahu, who is wanted for war crimes by the International Court of Justice, who was on the so-called Board of Peace. So it's really a dismantling of international law. And if he still has ambitions for a Nobel Peace Prize, if he wants to salvage any credibility, he could turn this around. I mean, he has experience in sort of walking back previous positions. I mean, he had all these threats to Greenland, which he's apparently now walked back, and he's made some kind of arrangement for, additional U.S. bases. He could do some kind of walking back of his positions in the Middle East, and he should by no means plan to attack Iran. That is a huge mistake.
Elizabeth, I have a lot of problems with his peace board. Number one, he's basically saying to the world, I am going to be the chairperson forever, as long as I live, is basically what he's saying. I'm going to run this thing. Second of all, why is he demanding a $1 billion entry fee to become a member of this peace board? I really don't get that. And he has blown off people that he doesn't like the prime minister and the spokesperson from Norway. He's blown off Macron, whom he doesn't like. He's pissed off now at this Mark Carney, the new prime minister from Canada. He doesn't want him on the board. He's picking all his buddies. And Jesus, when you think about adding Netanyahu to this, I'm out of breath. But Elizabeth, you mentioned international law. He's bypassing the role of the United Nations to be involved in peacekeeping in conflict places around the world. I mean, how can anybody believe in this? I think it's a scam. I think it's a total scam. And I really don't understand why Russia is even bothering to consider participation in this. Your thought?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said, and you know, Trump has launched so much drama since he took office, and this is another lots of drama and lots of bluffing and then walking back of positions. And obviously he's thrown NATO into disarray. He's thrown his all of his allies into disarray, and he's created great doubts as to whether the international community as a whole or international law can even survive. But I think that behind all this drama, you see a president who is very busy enriching himself. I mean, you mentioned the $1 billion basically, entry into the club, and clearly they're going to divide the spoils. I mean, they're treating Gaza like a piece of meat. And it's not unprecedented. I mean, you look at the Sykes-Picot Treaty and how the Middle East was carved up, between France and England, and even the United States. So, I mean, but this is really obscene and grotesque because amid all this so-called ceasefire, I mean, it's nonsense. The genocide continues. Hundreds and hundreds of people are still being killed. There is no peace process. The perpetrators of this mass slaughter or genocide or whatever you want to call it, are the ones that are forming the so-called Board of Peace. I mean, the United States and Israel. So, but I see personal enrichment. I mean, you look at Jared Kushner, and you look at Witkoff. Both of these are real estate people. This is all about personal enrichment. I mean, there are oil fields off of Gaza. Look what the United States did when they invaded Iraq. I mean, they did it for the oil. Look what they did when they kidnapped Venezuela. I mean, this is about the oil. The same with Libya. Whenever you see the United States engaged in these kind of things, you have to look behind it and say, okay, would they be interested if Gaza's only export were carnations? or olive oil? No, I mean there is real oil off the shores of Gaza, and they see a beautiful waterfront property, and that's a sad thing, is that to them the people are just like unruly tenants that need to be pushed out, and their goal, Regis, unfortunately, is to kill as many of them as possible, and whoever's left is going to be herded into this massive concentration camp that they're laying the groundwork for down in Rafah. They've already got bulldozers down there, and and Israel has already taken about half of Gaza, but they have profit and enrichment on their minds, and sadly, this is what it's all about.
It's sickening, Elizabeth. Witkoff and Kushner are not diplomats. And they've been dealing with Kirill Dmitriev, Russia's special guy for relationships with capitalist United States and the West. He's a deal maker. And, it's been stated that Kushner has dreams about a Trump casino, a Trump Mar-a-Lago, a Trump golf course along the Mediterranean. And just a couple of weeks ago, I think when Trump first time he saw a map of Crimea, he said, "Oh my God, it's surrounded by 4 oceans." And he said, "It's warm there." And he looked at the coastline along the Black Sea where I live. And he himself was dreaming about a Mar-a-Lago somewhere just south of Yalta. I'm sure he was dreaming of a Trump golf course because we don't have any real golf courses here in Crimea. Much there are some, I guess, around Moscow. And I think it's been all about deals. It's been all about not just real estate deals they're trying to tempt Putin with, but they're trying to tempt him with deals about oil, about gas, about fertilizers, about rare earth minerals. All these people see is profit. And you mentioned Trump and his family have enriched themselves in the last year that he's been in. I read an article today. It's over $1 billion that it's estimated he has enriched his family in access and deals. All right, so I get that off my chest. Now, Elizabeth, our good friend Ray McGovern used to have his daily information sharings with, I think, Ronald Reagan, whoever was in power at that time. And somebody from the CIA would come up and give him a daily briefing. Now, if you personally were the person who had to go up and brief Donald Trump every day, I'm wondering, what would you tell him about wanting to promote this meeting in Abu Dhabi today, between representatives from Russia? I haven't seen who they are yet. Representatives from Ukraine, and probably Witkoff and Kushner. What would you whisper into Trump's ear? We know he doesn't read anything. I think the guy is a moron. He's illiterate. And he just basically wants somebody to tell him what's going on. Honestly, Elizabeth, what would you tell this guy if you had a chance to talk to him this morning?
I would tell him what I think, his advisors have probably been keeping from him, that, this war really could have been finished a long time ago. And that, he really needs to accept that it just has to end. And I don't really think that there's a role for the United States in making this happen, since we have actually aggressively funded Ukraine the whole time. And in fact, we ourselves have began the conflict back in 2014 with the Maidan coup. So to me, it just seems very strange that we would even pretend to be an honest broker. I mean, if Trump wanted to do something, I would say that he should bring in, a seasoned State Department diplomat, one of the old senior Russian people who perhaps, has talked with Putin personally and knows the players well, and allow them to work it out, allow the two sides. And the other thing I would say is that in order to level the playing field, I would say, stop immediately at any funding to Ukraine. I mean, you can't have a level playing field or pretend you're an honest broker if you're still arming one side. So, and frankly, it's the same. I would tell them the same thing in the Middle East. If you really want to have peace, stop funding Israel, because it's only when there's a level playing field that the two sides can actually talk. And I think that, that years ago, when the Minsk Accords were on the table, there was actually a possibility of peace. But the Europeans wouldn't allow it. The Americans wouldn't allow it. And as long as the Europeans and the Americans continue to fund and subsidize conflict, I mean, it's just more dead Ukrainians and more dead Russians, both military and civilians, piling up on both sides. And the only winners are the military industrial complex folks. And that's the sad truth of this, is that it's a bonanza for as long as it goes on, for those who are manufacturing, excuse me, the weapons of war. Excuse me. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
I'm okay now.
Listen, Elizabeth, by now, Trump would have kicked you out of the office. He'd have kicked you out of he would not like anything you just said. And, you started hitting on some points that I wish that I had Putin's ear. He's got a lot smarter people around him than me. But I'm not the only one who's been saying, listen, Donald Trump, show me a sign that you're serious. Words do not mean anything. We don't trust you. Putin has said that. Lavrov has said it. The United States is agreement incapable, going all the way back to the beginning of the United States with the broken promises and agreements with the Native Americans. The United States has unilaterally pulled out of all of the nuclear treaties. Trump did it himself in his last administration. He's not willing to sign the New START. And so I'm saying, Russia, why don't you demand a concrete sign that you want to negotiate in faith? And I'll give you some examples, and I want your comments. Barack Hussein Obama, who I despise, I fell for his change and hope you can believe in the first time. It wasn't long before I saw this guy was a chameleon. He was a Trojan horse. But he is the first one who stole Russian property in the United States. He stole embassies. He took consulates. And Russia did a tit for tat. They did the same thing in Russia. Now we don't have functioning consulates and embassies anywhere here in Russia. I don't even think in America. And the diplomats have gone home. They do not have freedom of travel. I don't know why the Russian Federation has not demanded, as you said, stop funding Ukraine with money, with continuous allotment of weapons, even though they wink, wink, sell it to NATO, which then gives it to Ukraine, sharing satellite intelligence. Why don't they show some sign that they're serious? And that's not the end of it. There are so many other signs that the United States is serious that Russia could demand. What are your thoughts on that? I don't understand why Russia keeps wanting to say, oh, we're willing to talk to you. We're going to go to Abu Dhabi. But you know what? You keep doing the same thing. And as you mentioned, Elizabeth, he's doing the same thing. Donald Trump in the United States is fully funding Israel to commit genocide in Palestine. Elizabeth, I'm sitting here in the Russian Federation. I just don't get it. What are your thoughts?
I'm guessing, Regis, that what you've just said about, Putin is your feelings about this are probably reflected in the Russian population. I'm guessing that the Russian people are getting increasingly impatient with Putin and wanting him to do action. I think a lot of a lot of people in the international community who who appreciate Putin's intelligence and wisdom are wondering, what is his next move? I mean, everyone says that Putin is a great chess player, but I think people are all waiting for a decisive move, and I think that he hasn't shown a lot of decisive behavior, and I don't, it makes you wonder if he just thinks that this is a, complete lunatic administration in the United States that just needs to be waited out. It could be that, if he may be concerned, I'm sure that, Lavrov has his ear, that they don't want to, issue maybe too many ultimatums that could provoke a nuclear conflict or something. I mean, we have a very unstable group of people in the White House right now. And it could be that, Putin is walking on eggshells saying, well, we have to wait for the right moment, because really these people are very unpredictable. They're capable of anything. We've seen what they did with a head of state in Venezuela. But I agree that the Russian people must be getting very impatient with their leader. And this is not good for Putin domestically. I'm sure that there's a groundswell of impatience in Russia. So I think he should act, not just for domestic reasons, but because, I'm sure that he at some level this does have to end. But the question is, how do you deal with a gangster state on the other side of the Atlantic? I think this is unprecedented. I think it's never been so open. I mean, you're right about Obama and that it was sort of bait and switch. And that's really the difference with the Democrats, is that they're never so open about, what they have in mind. On the other hand, that's an advantage. Trump, you what you see is what you get. And but I really do worry that if Putin doesn't act soon, there could be some kind of nuclear issue. There are low range or low level nukes that can be used, and I know that Ukraine is very interested in rearming on the nuclear side. So the longer Putin waits, I think that the more danger to Mother Russia.
I have to tell you this. I have been supporting President Putin in Russia in the patience that he's exercised in Ukraine. I'm not alone on that. His favorability rating after numerous polls is hovering above 80 percentile, the 80th percentile. He has the support of the Russian people. But when you look at what's happening today with the Alaska meeting, and then with Witkoff and Kushner being the primary contacts between Donald Trump, the United States, and Russia, not with Lavrov, not with the diplomatic corps, you got to wonder what the heck is going on here. I can't tell you what Russian people are thinking. I don't know. I do know this. The Russian people and people in Crimea know that many of their young men and women have died in this conflict. They have sons, daughters, fathers, husbands who have died. And yet, I do believe that the Russian people understand this is just another attempt to inflict a strategic defeat on their country, on the motherland, to steal its resources. World War II is recent in the minds of all Russians that I know, whether they were alive at the time, whether they were immediate survivors, or today. This is part of who they are. And so I think they understand what's going on. I just don't understand why Putin continues to say, well, we're open to talking, but doesn't demand a concrete sign from Donald Trump right now, who they claim have a good relationship, show me a concrete sign you're serious. Cut back your support for Ukraine. Give us back our territories for our consulates. Let's reestablish consular relationships. Let's reestablish direct flights between Moscow and New York and San Francisco or Los Angeles or wherever they go. But there's not been one sign. And this is what bothers me. Um, I've been talking with a lot of my friends here in Crimea, and there's nobody that wants this war to continue. Nobody wanted it, but they knew that it was inevitable. They have paid a price because for over 50 years, Crimea was part of Ukraine. There was intermarriage. They went to school in each other's universities. And there was such a sense of we are who we are. We're together. Putin has said it many times. The Ukrainians are our Slavic brothers and sisters. He didn't want to do this, but this is how the people here feel. Okay? They wish that this war had not had happened. Now, I want to get your opinion on this. What Vladimir Putin has done recently, ever since I don't think it's an alleged attack on his life in December of this past year, when they fired some couple hundred drones from somewhere that were guided by United States satellites trafficking coordinates to hit his residence in Novgorod, which is also a secret underground bunker, part of Russia's nuclear response strategy. I just don't understand how, given that and everything else we've been talking about, that Russia would even entertain, number one, being on the peace board, and number two, going to Abu Dhabi today to talk about what? I just would like to see some concrete sign from the United States that they're serious about talking. What are your thoughts, Elizabeth?
It may just be for show, Regis, because as you and I both know, I mean, there really is no diplomacy anymore per se in the United States. I mean, the State Department is in shambles. It's basically just Trump and his let's make a deal mafia, going around doing the art of the deal. But to be seen internationally and to be having these talks, I mean, it is a step up from Biden. I mean, let's face it, there are Russians and Americans talking with one another, and you touched very momentarily on the better relations between the U.S. and Russia. I mean, they are still talking to each other. I mean, it seems to me that with these talks going on and looking at the behavior of the United States, I mean, they've kind of refocused their military and rhetorical aggression away from Russia and actually away from China for that matter, and seem to be focusing on targets like that are not superpowers, middle countries such as Iran, such as Venezuela, even this funny business in Gaza with the Board of Peace. It seems like they have turned their attention to weaker targets that they believe they can control. It may well be that Trump has realized that, Russia remains a powerful sovereign superpower, and it may be time to just make a deal rather than do any kind of real strong arm tactics like they're trying to do in these other countries. So I mean, my hope is that things will de-escalate. I mean, that's something that we can all hope for. I hope that's what it's about. There is talk about, sort of improving relations between the two countries. But it's really hard to tell at this point why, as you say, why Putin would entertain these talks. I mean, earlier, I think last year, I remember hearing Lavrov saying, we don't have anything more to talk about. So let's it remains to be seen whether this is just for show or whether we could actually see some progress. I mean, part of me wants to think that the Russians would not be coming to the table unless there were already some assurances or some kind of indication that something concrete was going to be done. As you said, many people have died on both sides, and it could be that the Ukrainians are ready to make a deal. It's hard to tell.
Yeah. From where I'm sitting, right next door to where this conflict is, in fact, it's taking place here in Crimea, because they're sending drones here every day. You don't hear about it. Even we don't hear about it sometimes on where these attacks are taking place. But ever since December and this attack on Putin's residence in Novgorod, Russia has upped the ante in Ukraine. They have unleashed holy hell across Ukraine, east to west, north to south. Kiev is without electricity, water. Vladimir Klitschko, the former world champion, boxing champion and mayor of Ukraine, told the people to evacuate the city, to leave. It's a multi-million person city. It's the capital of Ukraine. They are without water, electricity, gas, heat. It's just an especially cold winter that's happening in that part of Ukraine. It's happening all over, from Lvov, from Odessa. And Russia has been attacking daily, nightly, with unrestrained drone and missile attacks. Some of their missiles are the hypersonic type. And it seems to me that Russia is saying, okay, we're not going to be patient anymore. We're going to cripple Ukraine's infrastructure. It used to be, we want to impact their military infrastructure to prohibit the Israeli military from rearming itself, redeploying itself. And now that doesn't seem to be what it's about. It's about just totally crippling this country on a daily basis. Now, at the same time, Elizabeth, we have everything else we've been talking about. Kushner and Witkoff talking with Putin's Dmitriev, and then directly with Putin for 4 hours last night, willing to go to Abu Dhabi and entertaining the idea of Trump's peace board in the Middle East. And yet, what Russia has to do is finish the job in its own sphere of influence in Ukraine. I think Russia has finally taken the gloves off and are going to bring an end to this direct conflict with NATO and the United States. And I believe they are in the process of enforcing an unconditional surrender of Ukraine, of NATO and the United States in Ukraine. What they're talking about in Abu Dhabi, the first time they've had trilateral meetings, it cannot be talking about some kind of minimal peace deal in Ukraine where, okay, Zelensky agrees that the Donbass, Zaporozhye, Kherson, and Crimea are really parts of Russia. Zelensky, he does not want to, he can't do it or they'll kill him. The nationalists, the Nazis will kill him. So I don't know what the heck they're talking about in Abu Dhabi today. But what I see Russia doing and Putin doing now is looking to finish the conflict militarily, not diplomatically, in spite of the fact that Putin and Lavrov say, oh, we'd like to have a diplomatic settlement. I don't see it happening. What are your thoughts?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I have heard, I think that the reports are saying that, upwards of 600,000 Ukrainians have fled Kiev and that there's nothing there. No, as you say, no electricity, no water, nothing. So, Putin has indeed taken the gloves off. And I think the Russians have said, that nothing is going to be accomplished diplomatically, that has not that is going to change the situation on the ground. So if there is a trilateral meeting in Abu Dhabi, maybe this is the ultimatum of the Russians saying, well, this can continue or it can stop now. Sign on the dotted line. That's the only thing I can imagine, because as you said, I mean, what else is there to talk about? I don't know what's going to happen to Zelensky. But this thing cannot go on, and the Ukrainian people can't take much more. So I mean, I agree. Yes, the gloves are off in Ukraine, and it's very sad. I mean, because the Ukrainian people, of course, are suffering terribly, and the people in Russia are suffering terribly. And this is, I guess, an extremely cold winter. So hopefully this will be a decisive winter and end the suffering for everybody. That's what we should hope for.
I think Putin himself has been so patient in advancing in Ukraine. When people on both sides of Putin, there were some that agreed, let's restrain. We don't want to kill our Slavic brothers and sisters. We want to just chip away. And then there are others who are saying, we should have finished this off a year ago, 2 years ago. And Putin is in the middle. And I think he's been restrained, incredibly patient in not crossing repeated American red lines. They keep escalating, and Putin resists. He takes one blow after another, but continues the march slowly by slowly in Ukraine. And now I think the gloves are off. And I think the Russian people, they realize that. Now, Elizabeth, one final point. Maybe it's not the final point, but we haven't talked about it yet. Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov have insisted that the other side recognize the root causes of this conflict. And Elizabeth, you know this. The root causes are the advancement of NATO East from 1991 and 1992, when James Baker, the Germans, the French, and the English all agreed that NATO, when Germany was reunited, NATO would not move 1 inch east. And in these past years, under Bill Clinton initially and subsequent presidents, NATO has absorbed 9 former Soviet republics and completely surrounds Russia, including now in Sweden and Finland in the Arctic. Now, I'm looking at this from Russia's point of view. I'm saying, here's the United States and Donald Trump trying to have conversations with Russia. But on the other hand, Russia is saying, we're being threatened. Our security is being threatened. The motherland is being threatened by a strategic defeat inflicted upon us. And when they look at what United States, and it's the United States, let's face it, has done to encircle Russia, and now with Trump wanting to take Greenland and Iceland, you've got Russia completely surrounded, including in Central Asia, because the United States is getting its filthy hands involved in Armenia, in Azerbaijan, and in the Caucasus. And so it's clear to anybody in Russia who is looking at what's going on is this monster, and I have to call it a monster, and it's an evil monster, has completely surrounded Russia with the intent of not being friends, but with the intent on inflicting a strategic defeat. I don't know how whoever's representing Russia at this trilateral thing can say, listen, we are feeling terribly insecure. We're feeling very frightened because you say one thing, we don't believe this, but we look at what you do. We look at what you're doing. And when we do look at what we're doing, we see that you cannot be trusted. Elizabeth, that
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last bit of what was your question?
I said, when we look at everything that the United States and NATO is doing to encircle Russia.
I heard that part. Yeah, they can't be trusted. Yeah, but was there a question with that, or you just wanted my comment?
I just said, what are your thoughts? I mean, what can Russia possibly believe that the United States is serious when, forget the words, the nice, we're taking all of this into consideration. We're becoming very aware of what Russia's saying. But when you look at what they do, you see that they're disingenuous.
Right. No, and I think that, one thing that I do credit the Russians with, and I admire them greatly, is the Russians know their history, and we know ours, and not very many American people, I don't think, are aware that James Baker promised that NATO would not encroach 1 inch to the east after the deal was done to reunite Germany. So yeah, no, it's true. And this administration has shown, and previous administrations have shown, that they cannot be trusted. And it's clear to me that, it's just my opinion. I think Trump has realized that, with the basic effective defeat of Ukraine in this war, whether he wants to admit it or not, he realizes that, he cannot conquer Russia. Russia is a very capable, great power, but he has succeeded in degrading Russian capabilities, and he's killed a lot of Russian people. And I think that has maybe prevented Russia from taking perhaps a greater role in issues with Iran, with the Middle East. I think there were expectations that Russia would come in stronger on Gaza. And I think Putin has made some kind of statement that Palestinian sovereignty has to come first before he can join the Board of Peace. But the Russians are, as you say, are very distracted with dealing with Ukraine, with this mess that continues to go on. So the whole situation is so unequal, as you say. Russia is completely surrounded by American bases, and now, as you say, with the Baltics and the Nordic states, and there's no equivalent on the American side. We don't have Russian bases in Cuba anymore, or in or in Mexico, or in Canada. So what we have is a dying superpower flailing about, making a fool of itself internationally, spitting in the face of international law, and expecting to be taken seriously. And I don't think any country can take the Americans at their word anymore. Look at what just happened in Davos. I think the Europeans are really in shock at these pretensions toward Greenland and wondering who's next. As you said, Mark Carney made a statement which was actually very meaningful, that said, this is not just sort of an estrangement anymore. This is a rupture. So, we have a real estrangement and a parting of ways with U.S. and NATO, and you have to wonder how much longer NATO can survive under such circumstances. So, you know, Russia must be looking back at all of this and just watching the disintegration of NATO, and maybe thinking that the capitalists are going to hang themselves by their own rope. I mean, the United States is doing a great job of destroying its credibility and its believability just on its own. So I do think that Putin is a senior statesman. He's a grand chess player, and maybe he knows what he's doing. I have to hope that the saner people in the room, such as the Russians and the Chinese, can make the moves at the appropriate time, because the United States is really out of control at this point, and I think the whole world is acknowledging that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the Russians and the Chinese are playing the long game. I think they realize that the United States is a dying ember, that Donald Trump is flailing about with whatever he could do, and it's all they have left is the threat of economic sanctions and military intervention. The United States has no other credibility. You're absolutely right. And I don't know how this is going to end, but I do think and I do hope that Russia and China, India, and the BRICS can wait this out and continue to come closer together, become more concrete in their plans, especially in terms of the economy and trade. I'm not a big financial guy, but I do know that today silver hit an all-time high of $100 a gram. And the ruble against the dollar has accelerated. And so something is happening that I think that Russia and China and the BRICS understand, is that the United States power economically is failing, is collapsing. Now, Elizabeth, I want to finish on this because you're in the United States. What's happening today in Minnesota has happened in Portland, has happened in California, where you're at, has happened in Chicago, has happened in Philadelphia and Boston, and now is exploding in Minneapolis. Elizabeth, I am always trying to look at how Russia and China and the rest of the world are looking at what's happening in the United States. They understand that the United States is politically divided like it never has been. They understand that the United States is collapsing as a hegemon. They understand that the power of the US dollar is totally in their hands. They could destroy it overnight. I don't think what they want is a crash landing for the United States economy. I don't think they want that. But I think what they realize is that the hegemon is at the end of its reign, the end of its empire. And I think what we're seeing in Minneapolis and these other cities, I don't see it as Donald Trump necessarily his enemies in the blue states. I see it as really coming to the surface like bursting a pimple or an erupting volcano that is demonstrating to the rest of the world the sickness, the division, and the absurdity of what the United States is trying to represent today. What are your thoughts, Elizabeth, on this matter as we conclude our discussion?
Yeah, it's good to get your perspective, because I'm always interested in how outsiders view things. But I see this as a dying hegemon kind of turning inward and cannibalizing itself. I mean, they're basically eating their own. And the tragic thing is that ICE ICE people are trained in Israel, and you see them inflicting the same kind of abuses on their own people. I mean, they're taking people with US passports and disappearing children and doing all sorts of horrible things. And, in a way, I see this kind of brutality as sort of a sad indication of the circling of the drain, as this country basically shows what it's been trying to hide for so long, how what little respect and regard it has for its own citizens. And it's also a fact, Regis, that the United States right now is convulsed with the sickness of homelessness, of poverty, of all kinds of domestic problems. And this is almost a distraction. I mean, now okay, now we're what the ICE is supposed to be targeting immigration. So now they want us to hate brown people, or they want us to hate people who are a different class that we are. And this is what happens when the government has nothing less. They don't want people looking at the government, which I think, I mean, to be honest, I think the people in Minnesota are not mistaken about, who their real enemy is, but they want to turn people against each other as much as they can. And they want to create chaos and divide us as never before. And create even deeper entrenched class wars as people lose their jobs to automation and to AI. And, I live in California, and I don't have to go very far to see people who live on the streets. And it's a sad thing to see, especially when it's in a country that seems to have endless money for wars. And as you know, our country is also revamping its nuclear system, its nuclear triad, and spending $1 trillion in doing so. So, I mean, this is the real tragedy of the hegemon, is that it's eating its own now. It's cannibalizing itself.
Yeah, you mentioned something. It's class war. It's not Democrat versus Republican. It's not. It's a war between a very small few of people who controlled the world economy, the world politics, and it's a class war against all of us. And I think people have got to wake up to that, because if we don't wake up to it and we don't realize what's really happening, we are almost in the coffin as we speak. And from where I'm sitting, as I was a patriotic American. I grew up in the 1940s and 50s after World War II. And I believed everything they told us about America, the land of the free, the home of the brave. We're spreading freedom and democracy around the world. And I think this is what most Americans still are believing. They've been indoctrinated. We've been indoctrinated since birth for generations to believe that we're the good guys. And I think now the chickens have come home to roost. Pardon me, with what's happening in our cities and what's happening to the society, to the culture, to the morality of the United States of America. It's being torn apart, and people from the other side of the world are now seeing it in Technicolor. Elizabeth, thanks so much for being with me tonight. I really appreciate your perspective. You're on the other coast. You're on the West Coast in California. Your perspective as a former analyst. And I just wish that you could be somewhere in that Oval Office, Elizabeth, when Kushner and Witkoff and these other people are sitting around Trump and are telling him all of this stuff. And I don't know what you want to call it, the national security state, the FBI, and all of those different security agencies are telling him, I just wish that you could be sitting behind his chair and whispering into his ear but Donald, but Donald, but Donald. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Regis. Always good to be with you.